evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us either here or virtually tonight for this Meet the Architects event here at Cary Library. I'm Corinne Stembridge. I'm the library director here at the Cary Library, and I've been here about 12 years. And I'd like to start with a few introductions of people who are here on the team that is charged with the responsibility of making this happen. So I'll start with library staff. We have Alyssa Lozon, our head of youth services, who's arguably the most important person driving the project. And flanking her on either side, Ida Dennehy and Jay Johns, our chief director. And in the front row, Laura Bernheim, who's our deputy director, who has to figure out how we run the library while we're under construction. So very happy to have all those folks with us. We have from our library board of trustees, we have Susie Berry here tonight. We have from the Library Foundation, we have Pam Fowler, the foundation president, Mary Ellen Ringo, the foundation development director, Vanessa Manning and Liz O'Neill, who are leading up the ChiRP team. And then I would like to have a shout out to our town colleagues, Mike Cronin and Mark Barrett, who are representing the Department of Public Facilities. And it'll be their job to make it all happen once we figure out what's happening. And welcome to everyone at home. I want to call everyone's attention to the project website, which is carylibrary.org/ChiRP. Those of you who are in the room, you have a bookmark that has a QR code that will take you right to that site. And the reason that's important is that as we go through the process, that site will have all of the documents and the information about our project, so that if you want to do a deeper dive into anything, you'll be able to go online and find what you're looking for. The side navigation on that page, you can see our architect. And but right, Kate, if you can scroll up a tiny bit, on that side navigation, we have our annual report to town meeting, which is a report detailing the process that we've been to so far. We've got the architect's conceptual design report, which is what you're going to hear about tonight. We have our children's room and large meeting room needs assessment documents, which are the things that we created before the architect came on board to define the project and help them understand what we need. The preferred design is just the floor plan for the design that we're talking about tonight. And then most importantly, there is a link to our feedback form where you can go to make a comment or a suggestion about our ChiRP project. So carylibrary.org/ChiRP. I want to give a quick overview before I turn it over to Stu and Natalie. In 2019, we actually went to annual town meeting to ask for some money to study the feasibility of this renovation. We were given $100,000 for that project. We started that work in 2019, late 2019, hired a library consultant to do space planning with the staff and a whole bunch of community engagement. And in fact, we had our big family community engagement festival the Saturday before we closed down for COVID. Yes, we took almost a 2-year hiatus on the project due to COVID, as we were all focused on other things. And we're able to get back into the work in 2022 when the architects came on board and we actually did the work of the feasibility study, which is what we're talking about tonight. Today, we've completed that work. This is an opportunity now where we're checking in with the community to have people look at what our preferred design concept is. We'll be taking in feedback. We're making the rounds with some community organizations that are heavy users of these spaces to get one last round of feedback for the architects, and then we'll be moving forward to finalize the design. And our plan is to be in front of town meeting next year with an ask for funding for this project. So that's our plan. And I'm happy at the end of this to take more questions from anybody, but without further ado, the rock stars here tonight are our architects, and I'll do a short intro. Stewart Roberts is the founding principal of Johnston Roberts Associates. He's a graduate of MIT with over 40 years of architectural experience in public and private sectors. Stu has been involved in the design of over 100 public libraries. And the recent renovations of Wellesley Library and Concord Library were two of the reasons we were so happy to be working with them on this project. Stu's also the founder of Library Next, which is a library visioning roundtable that examines the future role of libraries. Now, Natalie Eringros joined Johnston Roberts Associates in the fall of 2001, where she's focused on planning, design, and construction administration of private and municipal projects, including libraries, but also town halls, safety buildings, schools, and residences. And she's also been actively involved in sustainable design. She's LEED certified, which is important to us with our project. And she does historical preservation and interior design work. So without further ado, I'm handing it over to the two of you.
Great, thank you. So we're delighted to be here tonight. You know, having worked on libraries, well, I feel fortunate to have had the opportunity to work on so many libraries. And the really rewarding thing about it is the kinds of community support that we get. That's what we really like. So I'm delighted to see that people are interested enough to come out and hear about what the plans are for the library. It really, that's one of the most rewarding things that we have. We like to engage the community in this meeting. So I'm delighted that everybody is here, and I guess people who were online as well. So we're delighted. I'm going to just give a kind of brief overview, then I'm going to turn it over to Natalie, and she's going to kind of walk us through the designs as they stand. And we would love to get your feedback. That's really, we want to make sure that we do a project that is right for your community. We've done lots of libraries. Every community is a little different. So anything that's particular, or things that you love about the existing one that you don't want to change, or things that you want to change, we really do want to get all that feedback now while we're in the early phases. The project is about several things, actually. But I would have to say the children's room is the focus. But in addition to the children's room, we're going to be renovating this room so that it works better for the kinds of programs that you currently have. So you can do different kinds of things. Sure. We're going to be updating some of the finishes in the restrooms, doing the corridor space, and the steps. So it's a little broader than the children's department. I think the children's department is probably kind of the main setting. The sort of overall goals, we might give us the first slide here. I'm not going to read the goals, but I'll tell you in general what we're trying to do. We're trying to update the children's department. I mean, you might walk into the children's, or many people might walk in and think, hey, it looks pretty good here, right? And that was certainly the case again in Wellesley and Concord as well. But there are, but library services can change over time. So we're trying to update it so that the library can provide the best children's services that they possibly. So to do that, there are a couple of things that are kind of the big goals of the project. I would say overall, one of the big goals is to try to make the architecture and the design of the space a little more engaging for children and families. So we're trying to open it up more to the corridors. When you walk through, you really see in and know that there's something cool going on in the children's department. And then make it a little more imaginative. I said earlier, when I first walked in, I would kind of characterize what you had as a little adults department. What we really like to have is a children's department. So something that would engage a child's imagination. So there'll be more color, places for activity, for kind of active learning. We're doing a number of changes to the arrangement of the space to improve sight lines so that we can have a more secure library, so that things flow better for the kinds of functions that need to happen in there. And then renovations to the desk and the workspaces so that just the workflow for the staff and for patrons who engage with the staff. So all that works better. We're also have put a lot of emphasis on making sure that we have a fully accessible facility, so that there'll be some improvements, some access improvements that we're doing. And always when we do libraries, we really try to design for everybody in the community. I want to say the library is the one public institution in town that is for everybody, rich or poor, literate or not, young or old. There should be something for everybody at the library. And when we think about a library, we want to think about any little kids coming in and all the way up to bigger. So we're really thinking about those kinds of different areas for different needs. So you'll see all of those things as we kind of walk through the design. I'm going to turn it over to Natalie to talk about that.
My name is Natalie.
have already been introduced, so I think I'm just gonna jump right in. So when we started working on this project, we started by looking at what you already have, studying how the space is used right now, what the desires are, how we want to improve the space based on current feedback. But we also want to look into the future. So, you know, it goes from like studying original plans even and see how the current layout or current use is different from those plans. And then looking at how it will be used in the future, how we can make it flexible enough and yielding to any sort of changes that may come, we don't necessarily know. So we went through this space, I'm gonna look at different spaces separately just so it's easier to look at the plan. We went through the children's department and identified areas that require specific attention. In addition to all the broader goals, we're gonna kind of want to zero in on things we want to improve. And like Stu mentioned, right now you walk in and the children's library feels like it's off to the side. And we want to make children's library the star of the show because it's the first big space you come to on this board. And so the goal is to open up the entrance, make it more welcoming for families and kids especially. And then improve the flow and visibility within the space. So right now you can have the desk set in the middle of the space, but there's also a work area at the office or workroom set behind it, and it kind of splits the space in two. One for the kind of older kids, including shelving and some tables and chairs they're actually hidden from view. And then the younger kids and other materials and stacks kind of on the right plan here. And there's also the bathrooms that are kind of in the middle. It's a solid component, so it also blocks the view. So we're trying to kind of make some big moves, relocating the staff area, consolidating it into, instead of a bunch of little places, we're making it more usable, single area connected to the teen rooms that's next door, and have that linked to the circulation desk as well. We went through and looked through the stacks, counted them all, measured them all, just kind of to see, you know, how the books are used, how the stacks are stacked, what the tendencies are, and what the visibilities are. You know, sometimes we're taller than kids. Sometimes you go in and kind of dive down and see, maybe that's a little bit high. So, and also we look at spaces that are shared, like soft seating, craft areas, and how well they're used and how we can improve them. So I think basically we want the accessibility, the visibility, and that welcoming aspect that draws people in. Can we go to the next slide? So this is the preferred scheme. It's a little bit light, but I think it's useful. So what we did was we moved the entrance. We moved the entrance a little bit so that it's centered on the desk as well. And when you come in, there's a desk. It's really hard to see. The desk is right here, the service desk, so it's directly in front of the entrance. But when you're at the desk, you see the older stacks, the fiction stacks, the younger kids stacks, and the craft area, because those toilets that were here, we moved them off to the side that were still visible from the desk to there's supervision and safety, but it opens up the space significantly. So the idea is that when you walk into the library, first, before you walk in, you see it, it welcomes you, you walk in, and then you're drawn to different areas. And you'll see it later in the rendering, but we're thinking about introducing colors as a wayfinding so that kids that maybe don't read yet, they'll know to go to a yellow stack or green or red, whatever color it may be. And then the story and craft and play area, they're kind of tucked over there in the back of the library, but they're directly visible when you walk. So it also draws into it. Yeah, so like I mentioned, we moved the restrooms to the side and we made them slightly bigger to to accommodate a wider need. It used to be that the bathroom was a minimum right size, but reality is sometimes it needs to be a little bit bigger to accommodate different needs. Oh, and we identified some areas. It's hard to see here, but when you walk in, this is kind of a new book area, so it feels like you're walking into like this store with new materials, and there's some seating incorporated here. There's some seating incorporated in this nice area with big windows, some more seating areas by the windows, but because the stacks are low, you can still see what's going on. And then in the story and craft room, this wall right here, it's actually an open link, so we can extend the room to make it much longer. And kind of, it's very useful and very light component. We have two sinks. One is low for little kids, so it gives them that autonomy. They feel like they kind of have some ownership of the space, their library, and regular adults, adult heights. And of course, all the furniture, we're trying to keep it as flexible as possible. So like I mentioned, planning for the future, we don't necessarily know what the need may be like 10 years from now, but we make our best educated guess.
The only other thing I would point out is we're increasing the amount of glass from borders, walking and moving sense of what's going on. Make that a little more.
And there's a random. Speaking of the entrance to the shuttle, so as you can see, this is kind of that wall across the corridor, and that's the desk in the back. You can kind of see where you're going. You're going directly to the desk, or you can go to the sides and see different book stacks. That's that kind of new book area. This has a little bit of a curve to it, so it's improves that flow within. And it's hard to see here, but you can kind of see that the book stacks have different hand panels, that kind of current idea, which might change, but it's kind of an idea for the. This is just as you walk in. Again, on the left, it's the new book reading material area. And on the right, it's fiction stacks and the older stacks. And this is from about 4 foot height. So this is from the kids' point of view. And this is looking back towards the entrance. So you can see kind of how open it is. And on the left over there, I know we have a special Friends sale book card. We have a space for it there. And there's also some display built into that glazed wall that separates the corridor from the front. Just a little bit more view towards the story and craft room. So this is the desk. You just walked in. That's the play area and kind of story area, and that's story and craft room. And you can see how visible it is. Right now, I think currently, because of the bathrooms being right there, you can't even see the craft. You see the door. And this is just kind of preliminary look at what we can do for fun in the story and craft area and the play space. You can see that the furniture is kind of for older kids, for littler kids. So everyone feels like they have a space in the library. And this wall would be translucent, and we can open it up to expand space. And you can see like the book stacks have different colors because it's different collections. So region rooms here. Same thing. We walk through. We see how it's used. We met here a bunch of times, and we look through the space again, compared to the original drawings, to how it's used. Heard what the desires are for the future, and identified some areas we want to improve, things like storage space. That's always very useful. It's in from you, and exactly what we want. We want it in from you, but very efficient. Kitchen space, we want to improve that, open it up, make it not hidden anymore. Try it when you want it, but not always. And in general, keep it accessible, keep it safe and secure, and also just flexible, so that we can reimagine this room however it may need to be. Maybe it's a cooking demo class. Maybe it's a dance. No, it could be any story and dance and cooking demo. Yeah, so yeah,
That's a big piece.
it's a HVAC, the heating engine and air ventilation and air conditioning. It's that invisible component that makes us comfortable in the space. And since we're trying to make this a welcoming library, a welcoming enrichment, we want the air to flow.
And much more.
Much more energy. Yes. Let's move. Yeah. So this is the preferred scale for the meeting room, and it's hard to see here, but this is the small kitchen was running. It was tiny, and we reconfigured it. We opened it up to the storage next to it, so that if there's extra storage needs for the kitchen or cooking demo, it can be expanded into that area. The staff can use it as well. And this wall right here, it's a barn door that slides away and opens it up to the meeting room. And in this area between the kitchen and the kind of seating in the meeting room, the main space, we have a mobile counter that would serve as a cooking demo area counter, but also a TV screen or a screen display of some sort above to show what's going on. Kind of like almost a TV studio setup. And also it's also to see here, but these darker blue areas, those are the storage areas, and we made them bigger than right now. Kind of consolidated it a little bit, opened it up inside the room so that you can store all the chairs. In case you have a dance party, you gotta open up the space. Tables, whatever furniture might be, or we might want to think how we want to store some of it away. And we also have some built-in storage for it's actually right in this area. Stu mentioned that we're also looking at renovating and refinishing that corridor that's between the children's room and the meeting room, kind of part of the same area, and updating the bathrooms a little bit and so we finish the stairs. And a couple of views to kind of you can visualize what it might look like. So this is the kitchen in the back. We added the washer and dryer there, so it's more useful. There's the mobile counter that can be tucked away inside the kitchen if it's not needed. The display above it. Kind of how the room might be set up. Again, it's flexible. That's the idea. Anything else? I think that's it.
Okay, so I will, we would like to open it up to questions. What do you want to know about the project and what feedback do you have for the architects?
Curious if the teen room is also yeah, just curious if the teen room is also affected or if it's just because of the age.
So the layout of the teen room will not be affected. We might have to remove some ceilings to replace the HVAC components, but it will be minimal size interior of the teen room.
Could you go into a little more detail about the HVAC system, how you chose it, how you went about figuring out the configuration?
Sure, I'll talk about it. We have a consultant who was engaged to take a look at that. And the proposal is to do is what's called BRF, which is kind of I would say that's kind of the cutting edge of where mechanical systems are right now. So this is basically an air source heat pump that's very efficient, which would have some units commensurate outside, and we would be moving refrigerant around. So it's a heat pump system, but it would be ducted, so it's a little different from residential. So you have them on the wall. There would be all of the duct work in the ceiling. We're only doing this floor is this phase. There is plans, at least I could say, to eventually do the rest of the library, but for this phase, it would just be this floor. And really, the reason for picking that kind of system is because that's really from a payback standpoint and an energy efficiency standpoint. That's really the clear winner.
I just wanted to say a little bit more about that. The Department of Public Facilities did a system-wide assessment of the library's HVAC system. First to determine kind of how close it was to end of life, because we know towards the end of this decade that we're currently in, it will hit obsolescence at about 30 years. But also to see if it was feasible to split it and do it into sections to bring this floor up and then do the rest of the library later. We did think about doing it as a unified project, but the cost of doing the entire HVAC now is so large, and with the high school project looming, everybody thought it would be sort of the best kind of fiscal path forward to tackle the bottom level now, because obviously we wouldn't want to renovate the children's room and then rip out the ceilings again. So we'll do the bottom level HVAC now, which will help significantly on this level. And then wait a couple of years, and then at that point we'll unify the whole system. Other questions?
Just about this room and the AV and the audiovisual equipment and the positioning of this room too. It seems like the primary focus will be the present church will be over on this wall over here. But that flexibility to be either on that end of the wall where the kitchen will be, other spots in this room. Is it going to be equipment that's going to be flexible in that way, or an eye or something that's going to be able to, do hybrid Zoom meetings and things like that?
Right. So the idea right now is flexible. So check. The idea is to keep it flexible, so maybe the speaker is there, maybe the speaker is there, here or here. It can be oriented any way. We haven't picked the specific AV systems yet, and I think we will be working with the town as well.
But I would have to say that the goal is to have it set up so we can do things like this and reach a broader audience.
I'm just curious, so will the wall, this side of the wall, the large meeting room be the glass thing, so it's visible to
So this wall the plan would be that would be made. So the glass wall is really children's to engage children's department, but no glass wall over here.
Yeah, there's an elevator there, so we can't really open. There's, I think, elevator and corridor, so probably not going to do.
I think at this point we're going to take a few online, and then I'll.
Yeah, there's one question online right now. Someone asked, could you please let me know when the construction will start and how long it may last, and also what the interim arrangement would be? Thank you so much.
I can take that one. So if the start of the line, and that's a big if, we'll be asking town meeting for the construction funding next year. We're looking at a construction period from beginning September of 2024, ideally, and finishing sometime in the spring of 2025. We think it's about a 9-month project, but we may be able to get through it faster than that. It will really depend. We are planning to do a kind of a 3-pronged approach to library service during this period of time when we're under construction. The whole lower level will be closed off. We just can't operate any piece of it, unfortunately, with all the work going on in these 2 groups, plus the HVAC work. That means we'll be absorbing our youth services onto the main level, which will be a challenge. We'll be moving some book stacks upstairs and keeping as much of the collection accessible as we possibly can. We'll be doing programming, probably likely at the community center and maybe at some other locations around town to be determined. And we'll be doing all of our adult programming virtually because we'll have to give up our living room space to host the youth services. And we'll have staff in every corner that we can fit. But the bright side of the pandemic is we learned how to be flexible, and so a lot of those lessons will come into play, and we will keep services going.
And then we have someone with their hand raised. So David Cantor, I'm gonna enable you to be able to talk. You should be able to unmute yourself.
Done, if you're hearing me, thank you. David Cantor, member of the Capital Expenditures Committee. From our perspective, a lot of the questions relate to costs. There was discussion about grants being anticipated, especially for this particular phase as opposed to the later phase that'll be done. And I'd like some understanding of what we do know or don't know about the financing and the granting as a starting point.
Sure, I'm happy to speak to that. Hi, David. I'm happy to speak to that. The library, thanks to the Library Foundation and thanks to the fact that we have an endowment that the community has supported over the years, and thanks to the fact that we received some money from the state, we were actually able to fund this middle period of planning with private funds that have already been released. Generally speaking, with the municipal capital project, you have 3 phases for that project. You would start with a feasibility study, which we did. So we had that money from the town. Then you would go back for design funds, which is what we're doing now, which is what's being funded privately. And then you would come forward to ask for construction funds, which we will do next year. We anticipate the project will run somewhere in the neighborhood of $6 to $6.5 million when all is said and done for the whole project. And the library trustees and Library Foundation have committed to $1.5 million of that funding. So depending on what the final dollar amount is, we would likely be asking the town to pay for $5 million in capital next year when we go to town meeting.
Thank you, that's very helpful. There have been recent discussions of joint meetings talking about whether this would be a single phase or a dual phase approach. And at the last time that I was at the joint meeting, it sounded like the select board had not yet signed up to what you've been describing, which is that we are definitely going forward with a 2-phase approach. Could you qualify a little bit on that if there indeed been support by the select board and other parties that need to approve?
Sure, I'm happy to ask Susie Berry to speak wearing her trustee and select board hat.
Hey David, good to hear from you. So the library trustees, for those of you who don't know, consist of the 5 sitting select board members, the 5 sitting school committee members, and all of our several clergy in town. So we're a group of about 25 to 30 people. And the library trustees unanimously support the approach that we're taking now, where we're doing the lower level first. So David, I don't believe you took an official vote at the select board meeting, however, since all 5 select board members were at all those trustee meetings, I think you could say the select board supports this approach. Does that help?
It sure does. I think you know what I'm referring to on the joint meeting that we had. At that meeting, it was still left as not yet determined. So happy to hear that the factors just mentioned are pretty solid, and that's extremely important to us as we will look in this era of huge capital efforts. Thank you.
Any other questions for Kim?
No. Oh, we have Eileen J.
Sorry,
One,
we could, yeah. Eileen, I just gave you permission to talk, so you should be able to unmute.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great. Thanks. This is Eileen J. I'm one of the 5 trustees that Susie just mentioned, and I'm sorry I missed your presentation to the full board because I wasn't able to make that meeting. I had just 2 quick questions. One is, I didn't quite notice on your schematic, what is going to happen with the small conference room that used to be adjacent to the children's room? Is that, are we losing that, or is that going to be moved elsewhere?
Sure. The room that Eileen's talking about is the Learning Center, which is our smaller of our 2 meeting rooms here in the building. We are going to be absorbing that room into the children's room space. Space is at such a premium, and of course, our youth services are more than 50% of our business in the building, and they have not even a third of the floor space for those. So we really need that space for kids. We will, as a trade-off, we will have a slightly larger children's programming space in the children's room, so that's a net gain. But we'll be looking for ways to allow some middle-sized conference room meeting space up on the main level as quickly as we can make that happen.
Oh, thanks, Corinne.
Sure.
My other question had to do with, I know one of the reasons for doing this renovation was to just have better visibility and eyes on kids who are in the space. I was wondering about the height of bookshelves and whether that's going to change, and is that going to be able to contribute to better visibility of what's going on? I know the configuration is intended to do that. I was just curious whether that was something that's factored in.
This is like the $1 million question for our project. The reality in a public library is that bookshelves are space hogs. And we have a really lovely reality in Lexington that our children are readers here. And so our children's collection goes out, and Alyssa and her staff do a tremendous job of leading the collection, which means the general upkeep that we do at all times to remove older items from the collection, because of course every year we're buying new things. We did manage to get some of the book stack heights down. That was one of our objectives of this project, for particularly all of the book stacks of the collection serving the really little kids will all be the lower height, which they're not currently. What we weren't able to do was significantly lower the stack heights for the older grade. But the way that they're laid out and the other visibility changes in the room should make it pretty significantly better, and our ability to monitor those spaces will be improved. And that's one of the reasons we couldn't hold off and do the whole project in 2030, because we do have concerns about the safety of the space right now. And the major factor of moving the staff room and the bathrooms will absolutely improve safety significantly in the space.
The stacks are spaced a little bit wider apart, so that also improves the visibility between the stacks.
Yeah, I did want to just mention quickly that we've done a lot of work on accessibility in this space. It was one of the primary and important features that we were seeking to improve. We have kids in the building every week from cotting and lab schools using our facilities. And in fact, we've asked for some user testing from some members of that community to help us with that. And the wider stack rows create a better space for people who have mobility challenges.
Mm-hmm.
So, I like your idea of make the room more inviting, but I'm just curious, the classroom, if kids can see from the classroom can be seen from the hallway, that makes the children is more inviting. Right now, the hallway, if I look at your picture, it's just books. The new books, that's good, but old books also there, the classroom is somewhere behind.
Yes,
Yeah, that's just one.
so I think. So I think the visibility into the activity room will be better. It's not gonna be perfect, because you will be looking over stacks, but it's certainly better than it is now, where we have the toilets that are right in front of you, don't even know it's there. So, and as you move into the space, I think we have some significant glass walls, so that it's certainly more inviting once you're inside the space. But definitely from the corridor, you will, there's something going on in that activity, and I think you'll be able to see it.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I can find the rendering, I don't get it.
Yeah. One of the things that we heard from parents during all of our community engagement was that we had actually had a plan to move the play space and storage space closer to the door. But as you know, littles are really fast. And so the parents sort of unanimously felt that we were better served if the play spaces were in that lovely black back corner that's really sunlit and beautiful. But that does mean it's a little harder to see from the hallway. Yeah, so it's a tough trade-off. I wish we could double the size of the buildings, right? But I don't think the market will bear.
Just a matter of security and safety and things like that. And I was unsure if there, and I don't know what the policy in the library, if there is actually cameras watching public space. And was that a thought of redundancy to some extent as an add an extra layer of security for the children's room? And wondering if that was a question.
Yes, we do not live monitor any security cameras in the building. We use them only if an incident occurs to be able to kind of figure out what happened in the building. We just don't have the staff to be able to do that. That said, we actually do, I should say, the only exception is we have a monitor that allows us to monitor the teen space from the children's room. Because often we have that room might go on staff for half an hour if somebody's on a break, so we're able to see that. We are going to add some more capabilities so that staff can see the hallway is another place where we tend to get a lot of kids, but we don't have a desk. So there's no staff person sighted out there. And we will redo all of the cameras in the space. So we'll have better sight lines, but it won't be a huge assist for overseeing the space.
We do have another question from folks at home.
David Cantor, I'm gonna, you should be able to unmute yourself again.
Thank you. Having covered the select board, I turn to perhaps asking the facilities folks, is there going to be an involvement of the Lexington Historic Districts Commission? Is there an external aspect to this first phase?
Well, David, I'll do my best to answer that question because facilities is not here with us this evening. But yes, there will be some minimal involvement for this interim space. We need to put some piece of HVAC equipment outside on the library property, most likely in this little staff lot, which is to the side of the building. That will be there temporarily while we have fossil fuels system that's in a chiller pit right behind that screen, taking care of the upper two floors, and we have the new system taking care of the lower floor. But when we get to the point where those two systems are unified, all of the equipment should fit in the chiller, in that footprint. But so for a while, there will be a little bit of impact on the property, and that will go in front of the HTC.
Let me then extend that what has been presented to the HTC for insight, we have become very sensitized to the timing of approvals of certain activities. And since it sounds like you have a pretty substantial design, I trust it also includes the external presences that might be requiring the approval by the HTC. And I would just urge that the earlier than later, at least produce an introduction to them so that this can become a no question issue when you need it formally approved.
That's great advice, David. Thank you. Any other questions on that?
So can you talk a little bit more about like technology enhancements to make the space more digital?
You want to take that?
I'll add anything.
You're waiting to hear what I'm gonna say. So one of the big takeaways that we also had from parents was that our kids are sort of drowning in digital. And one of the key takeaways that we've received both pre-pandemic and then again after the pandemic was that the children's room should really be an analog refuge from a digital world where kids are on screens all the time. That said, it's a modern world and our kids are digital citizens, and we do need to have that capability. So one of the reasons for this space renovation in this room, which we're calling our sort of chameleon space, is so that we can kind of preserve that space as really book, drawing, creative play, and then have technology in here. We will, however, have more outlets and better Wi-Fi and all of those things that make it easier for anybody to log on with their own devices. We'll also be lending laptops from the children's desk for people who need to use them, and then they'll be able to take them anywhere in the space that they want to use them. So that's sort of our do you want to say?
No, I thought it was well put. We're going to have support for technology, but not an ease.
You mentioned the renovations on the board. I was wondering if there are any renovations having more glazing along the children's section wall.
So the renovations to the corridor will be the additional glass in the children's part. Everything else will be pretty much the same. We're going to have to redo the floor finishes and redo the ceilings because of the HVAC. The primary impact to the corridor is going to be.
Yeah, we're trying to figure out some cool seating in the hallway, which is a very highly sought after area for snacks in the morning and snacks from older people in the afternoon.
Yeah, I'm just wondering because it looked like the one small living room or meeting room will be gone. So is that possibility we can make this big room become more flexible, can be divided for us to do?
We haven't really looked into dividing. There are some structural issues with dividing the room in half, and then there's some egress issues. That's not something we've looked into so far.
And I just had a quick question about the hallway, which is, it sounds like you're preserving the seating. Will it also the gallery stairs be preserved? The walls?
Yes, that's the plan.
Any other questions in the room or online?
I have probably the most important question with the children's room. Does the fish tank stay?
You're gonna go over here.
The most common question we have been getting. Unfortunately, we no longer have our fish. And that is because the gentleman who very lovingly took care of our fish for many, many, many years retired during the pandemic. And unfortunately, we were unable to find anyone who could take care of our fish. So we joined the many other libraries in the area, and we unfortunately had to rehome our fish. But they all have wonderful new homes and are very happy in their new homes. But we just did not have anyone who could take care of our fish.
You know, we are in the process of looking for elements of whimsy for that space. There are some really neat ones that are part of both Wellesley and Concord that we're considering for our space. But the thing that will absolutely, I promise, will still be here when all is said and done is the Lego display. Because I think the loss of the fish was one thing, but I think the Legos would be a disaster. So, but we'll find some wonderful elements to add. Maybe a fish tank. We'll see how it goes. Any last questions before we end for the evening?
Seeing none from online.
Thank you. I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time to come out and be part of this. Again, we have the ChiRP webpage, you have the QR code. If you have feedback, we would love to hear it. And Isa is going to take people on a tour if you want to see some of the things in action that we've been talking about tonight. We can head across the way and I'll show you what we're talking about. Thank you all very much.